Hello and welcome to Mostly Vintage Cameras. This is a Franka Solida I. It's not the bottom of the range of this particular camera. There was a Solida Junior and there were also models above it, the Model 2 and the Model 3, and I believe there may even have been a Model 3B. But let's take a little look around at this. Now, most internet sources seem to suggest this is from between 1952 and 1954, and if we look on the top plate we see there's a label that's been stuck on with the Solida name. We've got a top plate shutter release, which is quite a nice convenience. Not all of these folding bellows cameras have that. Sometimes it's on the lens, the shutter release is on the lens only. There's an accessory shoe, and then there's a wind-on lever. So we'll come back to that in just a moment when we get the camera open. Now, as I say, this label is stuck on the top plate, and the only place the Franka Camera Works name appears, it's not on the front there anywhere, it's not on the base or on the top, it's only on the film back, just along here. And that's because I suspect Franka were very happy to make own brand products. So if you're a large retail chain and you wanted a camera with your name on, they would simply change this sticker to whatever model number you wanted, and then they'll change the film door, which is the quickest and easiest thing to modify, and put embossed whatever name you wanted on there. Now, there is in addition this little embossing in the corner here that says made in Germany, US zone. Now, the US zone dates back to the period immediately after the Second World War, when Germany was known as the Allied occupied Germany, and it was divided into a Russian controlled zone, a US zone, UK and a French zone, so 4 zones in total. But that period ended in 1949, it was from 46 to 49, so if this is a 1950s camera, why is it stamped with a pre-49 logo that dates it? And I think the answer is pretty simple. They were simply using what they had in stock at the time. They had presumably made these film backs in the past, in the 1940s, and continued to use them after 1950. So let's pop this open and take a look at the controls. There's a little stud on the side here. We push this, and the bellows extend. Now, this is a fairly basic camera, but it's not without some features. So when we look at the strut along here, it's a single piece strut. Most of these cameras fold in the middle, and you would fold it up by pushing down and folding this up. By having a single piece, this is actually a little bit stiffer than some cameras, and there's a release bar just at the bottom here. So you push that down and it folds up. So looking at the front here, you can see that we have a Franka made up lens manufacturer, 75mm with a maximum aperture of f6.3, which is quite poor. As you paid more money, you've got the Model 2 and the Model 3, you've got better, faster lenses, better shutters and so on and so forth. The shutter is a perfectly reasonable Vario shutter, but it only has 3 timed shutter speeds, which are 200ths of a second, a 50th and a 25th of a second. And then there's also a bulb or brief time just up here as well. The lens is also marked as, I'll try and pronounce this correctly, anastigmat, or anastigmat. And this is one of the very earliest types of optical correction in camera lenses. It's basically what you write on your camera lens when it doesn't have anything else good to say about itself. There are much better and later corrections that were added to lenses, but we are really in the cheap seats here. This is the most basic lens you could put on the camera. Looking at the lens turret, we've got a simple focus with infinity marked, a red marker for a general view snapshot, and then at the 9, I think this is foot mark, so this would have been for export. There's a full-length portrait. Yeah, marked in feet. So this wasn't for the domestic German market, I would suggest. Pop that back up to infinity. Then the shutter speed is set with this knurled ring here. I don't know how well you can see that, but as I turn the ring, this index lines up with a different shutter speed. So here's the index. It's currently set to a 50th, a 200th, a 25th, and all the way over here is bulb. It would have been very handy when I was using this had it had slower shutter speeds marked. So I used it in quite low lighting. Had it had even 1 second as an option, as a timed option, that would have been quite handy. So the aperture setting, probably best seen from the side here. There's a little control lever. There it is. It's on the top. This slides around. So 6.3 is all the way up here, and F22 is all the way down there. Kinda hard to see, but that's F11. So there's no light meter, there's no rangefinder, so you have to guess your exposure, guess the subject distance, set your shutter speed, your aperture and your focus. Then you have to cock the shutter manually and then take the picture. But wait a minute, it's not firing. I said we'd come back to this wind on lever in a moment. This little dot here turns red when the shutter's cocked. You see it turns red? Now it will fire. And even if I recock the shutter, it won't fire again until I've advanced the film. So that's a double exposure prevention, so it stops you accidentally exposing the same frame twice. There is a screen hole for a cable release, and on the back there's a little view window so you can see the frame number of your film with a cover so that you don't get foggy on the film on a very bright day. I've never entirely believed in the necessity for obscuring these windows, but something people wanted to do. Little top level viewfinder, not terribly good I have to be honest, but it's there, it's useful. The film back opening is very close to the lens turret extension. I'm just going to close this up. Let's pull this up. Oh. There it goes. And the back pops open. It's standard fare for this sort of camera. That does have these handy little fold out clamshells, I guess you call them, which just make it slightly easier, if I can get that out, to get the spools in and out of the camera. This is the take up. This is where you put your new film, and this is where you wind the film onto. It's a very crude system, of course, as all these cameras are. You just wind on, and on the back of the film the frame numbers are marked, so you see there's a window over here. As you wind on, the numbers appear in this window. I did find that window quite dark, as I say, I was using this in low light and really had trouble seeing the number on the film back. As a result of which I had to use the LED light on my cell phone to shine through this window to see exactly which frame number I was on and then when to stop winding. Just reassemble all this. There we go. When it's seated you'll see that turns the spool freely. So there we have it, that's the Franka Solida I. Not very much to say about it. Let's take a look at some photographs now. So I did run a film through this. It was a roll of Kodak Gold 200. And this is the first photograph I took with it, which was in a pedestrian underpass. And unfortunately I forgot to take a cable release with me, so I was limited to a 25th of a second. So I took this picture of some graffiti just as a chap with an umbrella is walking past on the left there. Possibly one of my favourite pictures on this roll of film, one of two. But as we move on, this was the second picture I took. I was hoping to catch what you might call golden hour, but in fact it was just a dreary, dull evening as it turned out. This is a railway arch. Here it is again, several views of this viaduct. Again, I was hoping to catch some golden sunlight falling on this, which I almost did with this one. And if you look carefully at the top of the viaduct, that line is actually a train going overhead. All the exposures were between 1 and 4 seconds, so the blurry line is actually a train. I was rather hoping to stand out more than that, but there we have it. A bush with a viaduct behind it, and there's the arches again, with the train passing overhead. Again, as with all the pictures on this channel, they're not taken to be works of art, they're taken to show what you can reasonably expect from the camera. Walking further down this path, we come to a little bit of a more wooded area. This is, along with that picture of the underpass, this is my second favourite picture on the roll of film. This is a 4-second exposure at about f22. Now, the lens is quite sharp in the middle, but it's very soft at the edges, even at this very small aperture. So not a high performance lens at all. Moving on, there's this little slightly flooded brook. Again, quite a long exposure. I was hoping for a bit more movement in the water there, but it was reasonably stationary water. much the same again. Yeah, these are all as you would expect them to be. Just a little walk after work near a viaduct. Because it is a 6x6 camera, it does have a slightly more interesting look to it than 35mm. It's quite obviously not a 35mm image when you see them. There's a little bit more depth to them. And then this last photo, which was the last picture I took on the roll, is the only one that didn't really come out at all. I'm not sure if I got the focus wrong or if I kicked the tripod leg when I took it, but either way it's definitely sharpness impaired. So anyway, those are the sort of photographs you can expect to take from this. It's not a terribly easy camera to use because of the limited shutter speed range, the limited maximum aperture, the fact you have to remember to cock the shutter every time before you take the picture, and so on and so forth. It's not a camera for perhaps a novice. That being said, it is reasonably fun. They are fairly cheap. I think I paid £15 for this or thereabout. And it does work. I mean, it's something like 70 years old and everything does work, which is pretty remarkable in its own right. Now, it did come with a little pouch, and again, as if to underline the fact we're in the cheap seats, it's not a fitted leather pouch. It's a relatively modest fabric pouch. Obviously, it's seen better days. So, very much intended to be a cheap and cheerful camera when it was new. It continues to be today. So if you want to have a play with a bit of a novelty camera, I wouldn't recommend it for anything serious, or certainly not for a beginner. But if you find one cheaply, why not give it a go? Anyway, thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed this video. All the best.